Hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Kelly McCormack, an actor, writer, and producer I first noticed in Play the Film, a comedy she made with friend of the show Christian Brune a few years back. Since then, she's written and co-starred in another feature, Barn Wedding, and turned up in episodes of Defiance, 11/22/63, and That's My DJ. She produced and co-starred in the Neddeaus of Duquesne Island for CBC Digital, and she's stealing scenes on Killjoys this season as new nerd Zeph. And somehow she had an hour to spare to do this. Kelly chose Phantom of the Paradise, Brian De Palma's 1974 glam rock musical nightmare about a composer named Winslow Leach, a record producer named Swan, and a singer named Phoenix, and how their Faustian fates converge at a New York City club called the Paradise. With songs by Paul Williams, who also plays the diabolical Swan, and kind of great performances from William Finley and Jessica Harper, it's an unforgettable, mostly indescribable ride. If you've never seen it, this episode is going to sound like two people somehow sharing the same psychotic episode, and who knows, maybe we are. This is Someone Else's Movie.
Phantom of the Paradise. Yeah. Oh my gosh, this movie means so much to me for so many bizarre reasons. There was, I did message you. I was like, oh man, I could talk about Labyrinth, Dark Crystal, West Side Story, Harold and Maude. I mean, I have so many favorites. But Phantom of the Paradise is such a special gem in cinema history. And I thought, well, I don't know if there's going to be anyone in the city better to talk about this than me.
This is why I'm glad you're here.
So I'll just say now, I'm not what you would call a cinephile, like you are. It's like my guilty thing, I have to admit. Growing up, I didn't watch any movies.
Okay.
It was always completely by accident if I did, which included this movie. But growing up, I was much more into reading plays and listening to musicals, and I was studying opera really young, and I had three brothers, and we had one television, and I had a single mom, and it was like they were just playing video games the entire time. And then we'd go out to my island, like in the summer, we'd go up to this cabin that my grandfather built 60 years ago, this like shack in the woods. And I think that's like the time, and summertime is when people watch movies, I guess.
Cottage stuff, yeah.
Just
because there's nothing else to do.
Exactly, and like parents want to go hang out, so they're like, oh, watch a movie. So I had seen The Labyrinth a bunch by the time I was like 19. That's like the extent of my... So now, as a screenwriter and as a producer and as an actor as well, I'm doing so much catch up. But I get to watch things for the first time and stuff. But I'm that person who, like, I could name every Broadway show and the original cast of every Broadway show and any play Samuel French has printed. I could like tell you, like, all right, this was first produced at this theater. But movies wasn't really my thing, but obviously now, as a writer, I'm very much into them. But so Phantom of the Paradise, I always call it Phantom of Paradise, but it's Phantom of the Paradise. I accidentally watched.
Okay.
So when my parents separated when I was like 7, my dad ended up, there was this like really weird 10 years where there's 4 of us, and my dad moved out and met this other woman and had another kid, and every like couple months the 4 of us would go over there, and we would like hang out with him just for a weekend. We didn't see him that often.
Okay.
And he had married this new woman, and it was really weird for a couple years for us. And like the nice thing about 4 children is that when you want to avoid something, you can just kind of escape, and there's likely like 2 kids who are like holding court, and you can just like peace out.
Right.
So my younger brother and I, Chris, and we were both the middle kids, and my younger brother was like such a interesting little kid. I must have been like 11 and he was maybe 9. And we used to go upstairs to this room at my dad's house where my stepmother, it was like a sewing room where my stepmother made maternity clothes.
Okay.
So there's all these like weird, like Judies with like pregnant bellies and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And there was this old TV that my dad had in like the 80s or maybe even the 70s, like a really, really, like with a knob, right?
Okay.
Like it was old for when we were watching this movie, which was been like the late 90s. So we were upstairs, and we were just trying to escape like our weird like family situation by going up to this room and turning on this television, which only got one channel, two channels, and we'd sit there kind of like huddled underneath these like, there was also like exercise bikes because it was also her like workout room of this woman that we like barely knew. Right. And
this is a really great picture you're painting.
we would sit on these like beanbag chairs in between like a elliptical and like pregnant Judy's, right, and like a bunch of fabric draped everywhere, and we kind of like move the elliptical in front of the door so like if someone were to peek in, they like wouldn't know we were in there, because downstairs there's like 3 other children and like a bunch of stuff going on, and we would just be like hiding. So we went upstairs.
This is like a reverse Wes Anderson movie.
It's like Noah Baumbach made a movie, The Squid and the Whale.
Oh, I know it.
And that one, if your parents are divorced, it hits home. You're kind of like, the weirdest memories of being like, I don't understand what's going on. Who is this strange person? Why do I have a new brother? I don't understand. Why did no one tell us anything? Like, all that kind of, it was, and we were like a Wes Anderson family. The 4 of us would go over to this one house, and, you know, my dad was very big into like manners and stuff. I will get to the movie in a second.
This is all important material. This is all about you.
It was like we'd sit around the table and like, you know, it was very weird for us because like my mom was a single mom with 4 jobs. Like we never ate family meals ever. She just was never home, and we just like fended for ourselves and whatever. So when we went to our dad's, it was like suddenly the 4 of us would like the 4 like dirty island children, and then like the new kid who had way better manners than us, and my dad and my stepmom who were really big into manners, and we'd sit there kind of like the Royal Tenenbaums, but like super awkward. Right. So my brother and I are upstairs, and my brother Chris is the weirdest of the Royal Tenenbaums. Like doesn't say anything for days, and then when he does, it's like a non sequitur, and it's just, he's like a quiet, you know, dude. Anyways, we're upstairs, and the only 2 channels you could get on this TV were the live surgery channel, which is a channel that was like in the hundreds where you could watch like live surgeries, and my dad was a doctor, so I guess maybe it was always on that channel. Okay. But horrific.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've seen surgery footage. It's absolutely nightmarish.
Yeah, it's like
especially if you don't understand what you're seeing.
Oh my god! And they were like the camera's right above the body. Yeah, my god! And there's these lines all over it. I can't even talk about it. So it was that or the Space Channel.
Okay.
And the Space Channel at nighttime later on it turned into we could also get the Iron Chef, but just the Japanese version. So we'd watch Iron Chef in Japanese for hours. Okay. And we just like try and guess what they were saying. Anyway, so there was Space Channel. Is this some
sort of demented satellite setup?
I don't know. It's
just
so
2 wires?
It's so weird. So we watched Space Channel, and there was, they always played a movie that was like a cracked out 70s like sci-fi space. Like they'd play like Logan's Run, or they played that weird one with Oz that, who's the guy who played 007, who am I thinking of? He was...
Oh, Zardoz. Gotta be Zardoz.
That's
Sean
the one.
Connery and
yeah, and like there's like naked women running around and blah blah. And I'm with my brother, and we're like, this is so weird, but like we couldn't stop watching. It was like, and in the 70s they had this vitality to their like to the movies. They were like nothing else. Like they weren't like, you know, we were growing up watching like Goonies and, you know, Mighty Duck and stuff like that, and this was just like, what? Like what is this crazy? So
unrestrained, I think, is a good
unrestrained.
Way to put it. Yeah.
So we were sitting there. Every time we were over there, we'd watch like a weird space movie, and we wouldn't talk the whole time. And then afterwards, we'd leave the room just be like forever changed. Like that was that better than being downstairs with the family? I don't know. So anyway, one day, it was Phantom of the Paradise came on, and Chris and I were enthralled. And like me being, you know, growing up through musical theater and music, it's this amazing, like instant cult classic rock opera feast for the eyes, like incredible thing. And it's all the music is written by Paul Williams, right? Who, if anyone doesn't know this, but like he's won every award you can win. He's also an actor, but claim to fame, he wrote like The Rainbow Connection, and like a million other hits. He wrote the theme to Love Boat. He's just like that guy. Anyway, do you want me to say like what it's loosely about, I guess?
Sure, yeah. If you want to. I mean, I was trying to figure out earlier, because I always have to write an intro and an outro for these things. And it's like, well, what do you even... If you don't know what the Phantom of the Paradise is, you can't really explain it in a way that makes logical sense. Right. Because it is, you know, it's your standard Phantom of the Opera Faust riff.
Exactly, yeah. I was like, there you go.
Yeah, it's built on bones, right? That are really, really old and really really simple to understand.
Yeah.
But that in no way prepares you for the experience of watching it.
No.
Kate had never seen it before, and we watched it the other night, and she didn't know how to process it initially. It's just like you're grabbed by the lip and pulled into this thing.
It's like no other movie, and I say that the choices that Brian De Palma makes, and like, are so confident, and the performances are so, like, I want to say uninhibited, but I want to say also kind of like unleashed or like unhinged. It's just they're the times where they could make it, do one thing, they throw it in a different direction, or like the amount of like medium shots of people just dancing. And so yeah, I guess basically, as you said, it's like a remake of like the Phantom of the Opera story, but way better. And Paul Williams plays this incredible this record label owner named Swan, who's this womanizing god like character, and then you have this incredible, what's his name? Winslow Leach. Winslow Leach playing this up-and-coming composer who Swan steals his music, and then Winslow Leach turns into this like deformed creature because he goes to jail, and he falls in love with this woman named Phoenix, who's the singer, and then he like tries to like write music for her, and of course like people die, and it's amazing. Mm-hmm. When I talk about this movie a lot, I've been talking about it a lot recently because my film Sugar Daddy, which is a music movie. I don't know if we've talked about it yet, but it's
just in the sort of most roundabout way, because I almost don't want to know anything based on what you've been saying.
Well, I will. I can tell you a little bit about it, but in its bare bones, it's a music movie. It's about this up and coming singer-songwriter who's too broke to work on her music, so she signs up for SugarDaddy.com, which is the cultural phenomenon of like e-commerce paid dating.
Okay.
And then she kind of throws herself into this like pressure cooker situation where she has all these clients where she goes on these quote unquote like platonic, not platonic, but above board dates. Right. And she learns how to package herself for all these different men, and then therefore package herself for the music industry. So it's one of those like, we have original music being written for the film, and she's writing the music kind of. There's a character who she is. She's writing the music for the film, and then within the film you see her singing the music. So the story's not at all similar to Phantom of the Paradise, but there is a setup of a brilliant composer of some sort who's writing music, and then within the film hear the music.
Right, yeah.
And that is so hard because it has to be actually good. And two things we didn't want to happen was the music just be like when the character performs it, you see the audience just kind of like clapping because we've told them to. We want the audience who's watching at home be like, oh damn, that's a really good song. Yeah. And in Phantom of the Paradise, it's incredible because all those setups are paid off. Like the song he's writing throughout the whole thing that Phoenix sings at the end it's stunning. Like, and when you have a movie where they're like, that voice, like she's got a voice like no other, and then you hear her sing, she actually has a voice like no other.
Yeah.
Like she's got this deep, like slow vibrato, weird, like 70s dream sequence sound. I hope everyone understands what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm always surprised. There are two things that always surprise me about Phantom of the Paradise every time I see it. First is that I always think it's in Los Angeles, and it's not. It's a New York movie through and through. I guess it's just all the residual Coke sweat.
And the hot pink, like,
it feels,
neon signs.
Yeah, it feels 70s. And the music, I guess I associate Paul Williams with West Coast more than East Coast,
totally,
too.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that it's Jessica Harper's first movie.
Yeah.
I don't get that.
No,
I mean, she's so assured, she's so confident, and she belts in a way that...
She literally has this voice. She's like, love. Look, that's my crazy intro. I sing way higher than that, but she's just like so like you literally, it feels like this 70s like
this smoky husky
dream sequence, like just like something's about to happen. Oh God, she's so good, and she's so confident with her dancing, and another thing is like it feels like they hired rock stars like every step of the way. Mm-hmm. Like the guy who plays Beef,
Garrett Graham.
Yeah.
Not a rock star.
Not a rock star.
Anyway, just a comic actor.
Just so good though, like unhinged.
Yeah, he commits. He fully commits.
And every song. So when my brother and I, Chris, were first watching the show, the beginning one. So another thing is that I love they do is that Swan plays this record. Owns this record label called Death Records, which I actually have a shirt that's of Death Records, which is an upside down dead crow. Yeah. But I couldn't find it. I was like scrambling through my apartment because I wanted to wear it, even though it's a podcast. I wanted to commit.
No, I get that. I totally get that.
Yeah, it's cool because the beginning of the show starts with this kind of like 1950s doo-wop group doing this live studio recording. And that song is so good. The Hey Little Eddie, born in Jersey City, started singing when he was 5. It's like so good.
Yeah, it's a pastiche of every doo-wop number from the 50s, and Tell Laura I Love Her I think is one that Paul Williams cites.
Exactly, yeah.
And also literally Little Darling, right? Like everything with yayas in it and all those weird...
But it's like a 1950s like feel-good song, but then it's about this guy killing himself to pay for his like so that his money goes to his dying sister. So everything just has this like turn of the crank weirdness, and then they become like the Beach Boys a little bit, and then they become like glam rock, Kiss or whatever. So you see the commercialization and the packaging of these waves of music, and then she comes out and just cuts through all of it. And it's and you know, I can't imagine, as someone who writes myself and also writing a music movie, it's like you want these moments, and then they come out and they sing this song, and this song is so undeniably good, and her voice is just so undeniably good, and you're like, well, better, you know, easier said than done. Like that's how do you write a song that cuts through an entire movie of music? And Paul Williams obviously can pull that off because he wrote The Rainbow Connection and every other good hit in like the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. It is really something, and it's really something to make a musical, period, with new songs. I'm always astounded when people figure out how to do it in a way that isn't derivative or that celebrates a form that already exists. And this one kind of does that by being self-conscious right away, self-aware, and using the Juicy Fruits, and I forget the other incarnations, but those 3 actors keep coming back as a Greek chorus, sort of.
Oh, yeah, totally.
You keep thinking this could work on stage, and then you realize, no, it couldn't, because you'd have to kill audience members to do it.
Yeah.
And that scale, that it just starts so big and so loud.
And then it goes higher.
Yeah, and it bowls you over. It won't let you question, wait a minute, is this really... No, it is happening. Shut up, sit down, keep going.
One of the craziest things that I think they accomplish is such a weird thing to say, but the extras in this movie, like... They have a concert scene, and one of the reasons why you avoid a concert scene in anything is because how do you get an entire room full of people to look enthralled without looking kind of like stupid, right? You know, just that's why there's like cut to audience just like clapping, like stock footage. These extras look like they're all high on cocaine, and they are just losing their mind and living their full truth as these like 70s hippies, and they're going mental. They're having like orgasms, it feels like, and then it just every other, you know, every time they have a new show, then they're on the stage and they're going crazy. And like, if you point, I've seen it so many times now that like I'll point out an extra and be like, look at that guy go. Like, look at that guy go.
Did you notice the guy who moves Phoenix's mic cable? I just saw that one watching it in here on Saturday.
No way.
When she makes her big entrance and walks out, there's somebody, and it's after all the bodies have been pulled out, so they clearly have techs in there.
Yeah.
But someone's job is to make sure that microphone doesn't get tangled. And whether it's a grip in the film or it's someone within Swan's production, it doesn't matter at this point because it's just a natural behavior.
Right.
But yeah, there's a guy who just very carefully lifts the mic cable over the corner of the runway so she doesn't get stuck.
It's crazy. Like, I watch it and the audience is going so mental. The producer brain in me is going like, is this safe? Like,
it probably wasn't.
I mean,
it was 1973.
1973, like the filmmaking, they're just so dangerous. They're just so... Like there's nothing's placed, nothing's like, and then this person will enter the frame and it's just a mess.
Yeah, but there are also these meticulous behaviors required for the split screen shots where clearly you're not seeing 2 separate takes, you're seeing multiple camera takes of the same moment. There's even that bit when the bomb is planted. I mean, I just, God bless Brian De Palma for having the stones to rip off Touch of Evil and Psycho in the same movie.
Having the stones, like, in general, could just be like this movie. It's so confident, and that's why I refer to it when I talk about Sugar Daddy and, like, you know, with my creative team and stuff, because it's funny, in meetings, like we went to Cannes last year, we were doing pre-sales in the film, and in meetings, I was like, yeah, it has, like, you know, it's this film that's it's modern. She's an electronic pop musician. We want to, you know, a lot of times like movie music movies are based in the 70s, I think, because undeniably it's the greatest decade of music making, and like it's got such nostalgia to it that like if you have to try and believe in a character making as a musician in the 70s, it's easy to do, where it's really hard right now because music is changing so rapidly, having a modern music movie, like it's just not done.
If you try to do it now, it'll be dated in 2 years.
Exactly. So, but that's what we're doing. And you know, we talk about how modern it is and how fresh it is and how like she's trying to be like on the front cusp of making music and you know, electronic music. But I always say, I'm like, you know, but with the vitality of Phantom of the Paradise. And then most of the time people are like, sorry? But then there's that one executive or there's that one person who's like, oh my God, that film. Which is another fun fact, is when I was in New York, you know, auditioning for Broadway shows and stuff like that, it's a big thing that you have a song that no one knows. Okay. Because, you know, you audition for musicals and you're singing like, I don't know, Thoroughly Modern Millie or something from Oklahoma or something from Wicked, like everyone knows what it is. So I tracked down at the New York like reference library. I tracked down the score to Phantom of the Paradise, and I used to audition for Broadway shows with the "Hey Little Eddie, born in Jersey City."
I thought you'd go with Old Friends,
and I also sing that too. Okay. Yeah. And I used to like learned it on the ukulele too. So like I would come in, but I wouldn't sing it like her. No one can sing it like this girl in the movie. I have to sing it an octave above her. Yeah. She's like, hallelujah. She's like, low. And I don't know how she does it.
It's just her. I mean, it really, yeah. You must have seen Shock Treatment.
Yes.
And she does the same thing.
Same thing, yeah.
And I don't know how. She doesn't speak like that. She doesn't even have the poise for that voice. And she braces herself in this weird way and it just comes out of her.
Yeah. And then so when you have 3 scenes of her saying, I just want to sing, just let me sing, and when the Phantom is like, Phoenix is the only person who can sing on music, you're like, all right, well, how good is this girl going to be? Mm-hmm. And in today's, you know, movies, like with a movie maybe like, I don't know, like a pop movie of some, I'm trying to think of like, what are like the new music movies?
Pitch Perfect,
whatever, exactly. Like or any Glee, right? The expectations is that she'd be like, like she'd be like doing like a big
vocal
sound.
Aerobic thing.
But, yeah, and she doesn't. She just sings a perfectly written song in her voice with like all the intention behind it. Like the lyrics are insane. Like our love is an old love baby. Like that's it. Yeah. It's like our love is an old love baby. It's older than you and I, and like our love. Our paths have crossed and parted. This love affair was started long ago. Mm-hmm. Like it's stunning, weird, cryptic stuff, you know, and it's so well done. Oh, it's so well done. I could talk about this movie forever. But yeah, I used to audition for shows in New York with this music, and then occasionally people would be like, "Oh my God, that was so pretty! Like, what is that from?" Like, "Oh, it's from this weird '70s rock musical called Phantom of the Paradise." And occasionally someone would be like, "Don't kill me! Was that Phantom of the Paradise?" I'm like, "Yes, it was. Thank you very much." It's so good, and like even the song that when you've referred to it a couple times, when they're like killing the people in the audience, mm-hmm. like they're creating the Frankenstein number where they're bringing up these like bodies, and like the 3 men, the Greek chorus, "We need a man," da, 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 it's so good. Oh man. Yeah. But I don't think it would work on stage, which is why it's so.
It's funny, every now and then you see someone take a movie musical and turn it into a stage production. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I guess so. Why not?
Yeah.
And I think there would be riots, I think, if people tried. Or maybe they already have tried and been murdered and we just don't know.
I have a big pet peeve with certain types of musicals that surround performance people. Like, so coming from like a musical theater pedigree, like you learn all these different types of, you know, there's really well written musicals and there's like jukebox musicals and stuff. So mm-hmm. when I have a pet peeve when a show is about performances, like about, you know, like you've got like Dreamgirls or Jersey Boys or like all these musicals about performances.
Right.
I hate it when then suddenly they sing on stage, but then when they're off stage they like break into song.
Yeah.
It's weird because
it shouldn't be allowed.
It shouldn't be allowed.
It's not fair.
Because it doesn't make any sense, right? So and then there's a jukebox musical, which is, in my opinion, I don't like jukebox musicals. So essentially it's a story. Because what a like old classic musical theater, Oscar and Hammerstein, like Stephen Sondheim, you know, Leonard Bernstein, all this stuff musicals. It's like the theory is when you can't say it and you're feeling so much, you can't say it anymore, you sing it, and when you can't sing it anymore, you dance. And and the song, like the action happens in the scene, and the song is by the end of it, the character is going through a revelation, and by the end of it, they're changed. So at the beginning of Oklahoma, he's like, oh, what a beautiful morning. He's going into it.
Yeah.
But the problem with jukebox musicals, I know we are not talking about Phantom of the Paradise right now, but is that there'll be like an action, and then they'll just like insert a popular song, and the song isn't, it's just kind of tertiary. It's just there. It's just like, okay, now we're going to break into song, and we're not learning anything more about the characters. Where... Yeah,
I think that actually works better as a function I found in cinema, because in something like Moulin Rouge, you can believe that these characters are so ahead of their time that they're singing songs that haven't been written yet.
Yes.
And part of the joy of the film is seeing how it fits and seeing how the pieces move. But if you just have, here are a bunch of ABBA songs that we have stapled a narrative onto.
Exactly.
I get it.
Yes, that's the Mamma Mia. Exactly. Yeah. Mamma is the greatest reference for that, for sure.
But I can't fully enjoy it.
And then when you watch...
Because those songs belong to us already.
Yes, exactly. And when you watch old musicals like Showboat South Pacific, Oklahoma, like any of those musicals, or, I was big into Stephen Sondheim is like my highest. People are always like, if you could meet anyone, I'm like, I would be a blubbering mess if I met Stephen Sondheim. And he's 80 and still writing music, so, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But, his musicals, like A Little Night Music, Sunny in the Park with George, Sweeney Todd, he wrote the music for West Side Story, which is another one I could have talked about for hours. People always say, I hate musicals. I'm like, well, why do you hate them? I'm like, well, I don't understand they break into song. I'm like, well, what about Sound of Music? And they're like, oh, no, I like Sound of Music. I'm like, what about West Side Story? And they're like, oh, no, I like West Side Story. And I think it's because when they break into song, when he's like, Maria, 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 like he's thinking, he's working through something, and then that causes music. And it's actually the same rationale that goes into cinema, is that you have a scene and something's happening, and the finishing the sentence of the scene emotionally is why an underscoring starts, right? Like it starts because something is happening, and then music starts because it's annotating the subtextual feeling that's happening. So I don't know. I could talk about musical theater for literally weeks.
No, it's great. It's great. We don't do a lot of theory on the show.
Oh, I know.
Musicals kind of lend themselves to it because every one has to establish its own rules.
Yeah.
Every author, every director has to know, because we've all seen musicals made by people who don't really fully believe in the form, and it's just like, oh no, that doesn't work. And Phantom is a musical in as much as people are singing constantly, but the context is always within the reality of the film. It's there are no asides.
No.
There's a montage that's as close as it ever gets to sort of non-diegetic, just Winslow composing.
That's true.
And we hear the song, but he's composing it. That's fine. It's legal.
Yeah, it's legal.
Within the rules that they've established. And it's so weirdly... I was going to say it's a weirdly energetic musical, but all the good ones are.
Exactly.
Because it has its own pulse.
Right. And that's why I found... I'm going to get some haters, but like watching La La Land for me, I was kind of like... I felt like they maybe needed to go back to like musical theater theory a little bit, because... There was so many times where I was like, there was just the gears kept changing. And I'm like, they're breaking into song, and yet, no, she's singing on stage, and now there's he plays a jazz band, but there's no jazz music in the rest of the show. Like, why are they singing Well,
that felt to me like the bones of an MGM musical, like the specific kind, like Singing in the Rain or The Bandwagon, where they end with a big production number.
Yeah.
But it's still in a modern idiom that doesn't...
Well, not just that. I mean, like, when you watch all those old MGM musicals, we're talking about, like, I read a book, like MGM, the studio years, and it was about how these composers would spend 10 to 15 years coming up with, like, the music for Mary Poppins, or the music for, like, Meet Me in St. Louis, or Easter Parade, or all these stuff. Like, these were some of the most brilliant musicians in the world. And I'm not saying that Damien Chazelle, how do you say his last name? Chazelle is not brilliant. I just mean, like, the composition of rhyming schemes, and, like, the detailedness of it. Like, and the amount of, like, if you study the work that went into Mary Poppins, right? And then the song...
Well, that's the Sherman Brothers, right?
Right, yes. And the songs that were cut, and you listen to those, and, it's so much work in construction, and every character has a musical motif, and so when they sing together, like, Sondheim's great for that. When they sing together, it's, you can hear... the motif, like Sunny in the Park with George, for instance, like, it's all about pointillism painting, so the music sounds like Philip Glass, and it's all that kind of deconstructionism and stuff. But like the studio years of MGM music, anytime I get a chance to sing, like I did a show where we got to sing like the trolley song from Meet Me in St. Louis, like ding ding ding, and like just there's like 10 parts to it. If you sing any single one of them, every progression to a different note is a story. It's so well done. Or listening to how, you know, they would talk about how quirky Mary Poppins is, where she sings because she's so weird. In most musicals, anytime you say down or up, your note goes down or up because the lyrics and the music are together completing a sentence, which is why if you put music to poetry, it just doesn't work because poetry inherently has music to it. So together, it's this like overwrought. It's like two rich dishes put together.
Yeah, the rhythms fight each other.
Yeah, exactly. And so I know that Paul Simon did a musical, The Cape Man. Yeah. I saw it in New York, and I almost died. I was like, Paul Simon, I love you, but this is awful.
I've only heard the score, and I still can't imagine it on stage.
It's a mess. It's a mess. Well, because he did it with the poet. Just the W. I'm so bad with names. Sorry, podcast. But The Cape Man, yeah, look it up. But so yeah, Mary Poppins, when she sings, they had this whole in this museum they have this whole letter back and forth about how fun it would be if Mary Poppins goes, just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Like she's saying down but go up. And when that came out, people knew so much, like how crazy is it that she's like, so, you know, the fact that she goes up on that instead, like it took years and years and years, decades of time to make this music. And I just felt with La La Land, it was kind of like they had just kind of taken a sweep at it. And even the dancing, like when you watch those old Fred Astaire dance, you know, the specificity from finger to toe, and that one just kind of felt like the bare bones of a, right. You know. And I don't understand, like at the end when she was singing out, I was like, why? Where was that?
Yeah, but that worked for me because that's the payoff to the movie for me, is that it's been hiding her because he hasn't seen her either, because we have to see, because we're in his perspective, and that is an inherent limitation in the film.
Yeah.
Because we're limited to Seb, we don't get to understand how really powerful she is until that last moment, which is, I think, also why it got the accolades that it did, because of the James Cameron talks about the recency effect. If you the last 20 minutes of the film are all you really care about emotionally, that's what you bring out of the theater.
Oh yeah, the last 20 minutes of the film are the best.
Such a high.
Yeah. I also got the last montage sequence was so great. I had like total anxiety about watching the first 5 minutes, because like if you're an actor who has auditioned in New York if you're a soprano who's auditioned with a bunch of girls in New York, you've auditioned against 600 girls in like prime colored A-line dresses. Right. So the beginning dance sequence, I was like, oh my god, it's musical theater school again. Which is, you know, like I'm a musical theater nerd, but I'm not a mainstream musical theater nerd, which is maybe how I ended up more in film right now. Because like, you know, you have these, it's not hard to distinguish. It's like, you know, like, oh, what's your favorite musical? And if you say Sunny in the Park with George, people are like, oh, okay, you're like one of those, as opposed to like the jazz hand musical theater thing. It's something you kind of have to. It's something I don't talk about. Like in the film industry, saying that you came up through musical theater is a dirty word. Really? Oh my gosh. Oh yeah.
I just assumed theater kids would gravitate anyway. That's just seems to be the way it goes.
I mean, like, there's just such a weird rep for musical theater and a weird rep for theater actors. I'm less so for theater, because you have this. It's really about appearances and you with theater you can say like, oh, I'm a Shakespeare actor, right. And then you have all the cred of the film industry, because film actors, like, they want to believe that that's like the highest type. But the musical theater, there's this misconception that people don't know how to act, or that, you know, they're over the top, or they're kind of showmans, and that's totally true. There's lots of that. Like,
in bad musical theater.
In bad musical theater. And when the good stuff is incredible, and you know, but when you go to musical theater school in New York, it's like you have to it's a shot of adrenaline every day for people. You know, I was in New York when Wicked had been out for many years, and it was basically like down the hall you could hear, it was like defying gravity. Like, the personalities are just, and also musical theater has this confining thing about it that I really don't like, which is why I moved more into film, is that you're either like a this or a that. You're like an ingenue or you're a vixen. And for me, being a blonde female soprano, it was like, you are going to play the ingenue who is the love interest and all this stuff. And there's these total like weird, like, you're this type, you're that type, or you're this. And they say it. They'll be like, oh, in this show, you're an Annie. In this show, you're a this. And I also loved like originating roles and writing and stuff like that. So there's not much room for that. But the type of musicals, so auditioning for Broadway shows with a song from Phantom of the Paradise was me attempting to be like, all right, guys, here's something weird.
And if it connects, it's worth it, right? I mean,
totally.
If you meet somebody who actually responds to the frequency.
Oh, yeah. Well, I moved away from, before I came more into film, I moved away from musical theater and did more like experimental opera theater where I was like naked on stage in the South, in like Tribeca doing like weird stuff. So... I mean, like, I ditched my, like, soprano rainbow A-line dress pretty quickly. But I came up through that, you know? So, but I love, it takes 2 seconds for theater nerds to be like, oh, da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
But this show, like, I've always, like, I watched it again on Saturday as well, because I was like, all right, I'm going to talk about it. I guess I should. Like, I've seen it so many times. And, like, Paul Williams, I had no idea, but he's in so many movies still.
Yeah, he's in Baby Driver.
Yeah, he's in Baby Driver, right. Yeah, because I was looking up on Wikipedia. I was like, whoa, he's in Baby Driver.
Well, Edgar Wright is a huge fan.
Really?
Just loves him. Yeah, loves him to pieces, and was so happy he could cast him in something.
He is, and he looks like he's never aged, and that's kind of what's funny about this movie, is that he's made this deal with the devil, whatever, and like that scene where he's in the bathtub and he's supposed to be like 18. He's like, yo man, like I'm like, are you 18? Like, I'm very confused.
1953 Paul Williams is 1974 Paul Williams is 2017 Paul. It is a sort of a triumph of that scene that it is impossible and still great.
Yeah.
You know, it's got multiple cuts, it's got close-ups, there are more than one camera going, and this is just him recording a suicide note in a bathtub, and yet somehow, because of all the devil stuff, I guess, it becomes its own little short film. Yeah. And it's insane.
It's insane.
But it is delightful.
Yeah.
And you were saying, like, I'm just saying the last 20 minutes of a movie is all anybody remembers. The last 20 minutes of The Phantom of the Paradise, I don't think it even has a song. It's just crazy.
It's crazy. And speaking of extras, in that last scene, and I guess we can
Sure.
Yeah. This last scene...
It'll be incomprehensible to anyone who hasn't seen it.
The last scene when Winslow is, like, crawling on the ground, you notice this extra who's just crawling alongside him and is like, yeah, man, like, you're living your full truth. Because, like, if someone just gets shot, like, Swan's face is getting all messed up, Winslow's dying, and all the crew is just like, party on, party on.
Yeah, because they all think it's part of the show.
They all think it's part of the show.
This is the second night of this epic cantata.
Yeah. I know.
After which one person has already been murdered, on screen, burned to death.
And I think poor Beef, I know, and he's so good. And I think it's also a little, not maybe a little bit, but a comment on this kind of. I think Swan says a couple lines that allude to this idea of, like, this is what people want. Like, people want spectacle. People want this grand thing, and like what's more appealing than a real live assassination and stuff. And you're like, yeah, not much has changed.
Network was 2 years away. Like, that hadn't even happened yet. I keep thinking, I'm trying to place it in my head, it's a reaction to this, it's a reaction to that. I said, no, it was there first. Yeah. This actually got there ahead of everybody else. Yeah. I think there's an assassination bit in Hi Mom, like in one of De Palma's earlier films, but this is one of these weird articulations of public policy by a film that no one paid any attention to. I mean, the only reason it exists is, I think, because Fox just didn't notice it was happening. It was under the radar. It was off in New York, and they were in LA, and they maybe got the rushes and had no idea what to do with them. But there's no question that this film is what it is because it came out of one guy's head. Yeah,
that's what it feels like when I say it's confident. It's like when he starts the split screen out of nowhere, you're like, what? Yeah. Okay, but yeah, and it's the whole thing feels like arts and crafts. But it does have a consistency to it in its like, in its maybe its vitality, or it feels like it's all one drug. Like it's just this drug that someone has been like amped, like just continuing to take, and that's why it feels consistent, because it feels like the same drug you're on the whole time, but it's insane. Yeah. And then and like the performances too, like Winslow Leach, it's not. It's kind of like how when I watch like Jenna Rollins or like any of like Cassavetes films, I watch her, I'm like, your performance is so timeless, like A Woman Under the Influence. You're just watching her be so messy and unhinged and uninhibited in a way that I honestly don't see. You don't see a lot of actors do that today.
Yeah, there's no hint of style.
Yeah,
right?
there's no hint of style.
There's just a pure unfiltered act that's happening.
Yeah.
And yeah, Finley is one of those fascinating. He gets his due in the De Palma documentary.
Does he really?
He actually lets
I gotta watch
De Palma talks about him quite a bit, and he was somebody who is his how can I even put this? His appearance is just, he was never going to be a mainstream leading man.
No.
He was probably much better on stage in that sort of role, but the Phantom, the role of Winslow Leach, is as close as he ever got to a proper star role. And he's really good.
He's really good, but
he's got pathos and he's got sympathy, and he even manages to put in that weird little twitch about the temper early on.
Yeah. But it's also like you watch him and go, no one would ever let this happen. Because it's like, you talk about, I mean, the last thing that I ever want to think about as an actor, but I know some actors are really good at it, is like angles. Like, I don't know that stuff. I've tried intentionally not to. I don't ever watch like the monitor. I don't want to like know if there's a certain way I'm supposed to be lit or whatever. Maybe when I'm like, unfortunately, when for most female actors, when they're in their like 40s and 50s, that's like the only thing they talk to you about, because they think because they're so hard on you to wait to look a certain way, to look younger or to look older or whatever. It's just, maybe this will be something that I will have to focus on more. But like this idea of like, you look attractive or appealing or cinematic in one part of your face.
Right.
Winslow Leach is going ham. Like, the guy is like, there's an entire scene where he's only showing us like his neck, and you're like, God, dude, this is amazing. Like, you're just like, when he's playing at the very beginning, he's just throwing his head around. and scary, like and I love in the movies in the 70s when no one has white teeth, no one's eyes have been like whited out. They've like, there's just a rawness to it, and you can see the makeup, you can see all of it, and like the cigarette stains on people's fingers and stuff. It's so good. But I don't know, like what else he's been in. I did Google this on.
He's been in a bunch of De Palma's films.
Yeah.
If there is a major other role, I don't know it.
Right.
But there's also, his choices are so specific that I can't imagine he would have had a long mainstream run. It's just the stuff. Like, even as the Phantom, he almost never blinks. That one eye is like wired open.
Well, that's what I mean. Is that like, I'm like, gosh, dude, this doesn't look attractive in any way. You're like, scary. But it's amazing because he just went there. I
can't imagine people coming out of this and going, oh, we need to get him for our next picture.
Well, this is what I'm saying.
It's like, you've seen the perfect performance from him. This is what he was made for.
Right. So I guess that's kind of what I'm driving at, is like, it's such an incredible performance, and yet I wouldn't know where else to put him.
Mm-hmm. And Williams, as an actor, didn't do a lot, but I just think it was never really his focus. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, he barely sings in this film, right? Does he sing at all? He has... Yeah,
he sings the Faust at the beginning.
Right.
I was not myself last night in the morning. But I'm like,
we don't see it, do we?
We see him play, because like at the beginning, the Juicy Bits play, and then they leave, and then he comes on stage and he's just playing, and then Swan's like, quiet, I've got to listen to this guy. But he doesn't look like he's actually playing the piano. Mm-hmm. That for sure.
And then you see Harper show up, and she doesn't play an instrument, she just sings, but she sings so big. Well, this is the thing I was trying to remember and lead into, and I couldn't figure out how, but it's amazing to me that so much of this film involves characters who are fully formed. Mm-hmm. Leach is the only person we ever see at home, I think.
Yeah.
Swan, you get a bedchamber, but it's clearly not where he lives.
Yeah.
Everybody else just arrives.
Yeah, that's so true,
Phoenix
actually.
manifests herself in the audition line. Swan is established before the movie begins. Juicy Fruits are established. Beef just shows up. They have no home lives. They only exist for this.
Well, and also there isn't any moment where it's just a clashing of people.
Yeah.
There's not ever a moment where Phoenix is thinking like, I can't make it, or I don't have the voice, and someone else teaches her to. She's like, no, I'm the best singer. Just give me an opportunity, and then they do. Yeah,
Leach gives her one note reading, basically.
Yeah.
And she's already going where he wants the song to go.
Yeah. And then that's it. Yeah, there really isn't any... character arc.
And there's almost no exposition either. It just races through, like, scene to scene.
This is drugs.
Well, yeah, you were saying it's like someone invented the drug, and I was saying to Kate, completely unrelated. I was like, this is the movie that made it necessary to invent crystal meth.
Yes.
Because now we know what it feels like.
Yes. I mean, you're just watching that's why it's, to bring it back to the bizarre ass way that I watched this thing with my brother.
And you were 11?
I was 11, and he would have been 9, and we were just sitting in this part workout room, part maternity clothes, like sewing room. We also watched it in the dark on a TV that was like
a 20-inch screen.
Yeah, a 20-inch screen, and we were just like, wow, like our eyes were just as big as his for. And then we like left, and we came downstairs, and people were, were like, "What were you guys doing?" And we're like, "We're forever changed." Like this movie. And the funny thing is that after that, I occasionally just be singing the music, and Chris would be, he was obsessed with like the Juicy Fruit songs, and then like I forgot about it. We forgot about it for years, and then years later, before I had moved to New York, like must have been like 17 or 18. My brother Chris, he like around Christmas time. He always like, he's not the best at like remembering to buy people gifts and stuff like that. He's a little bit of like a space cadet. Okay. And he was like, "Yo, Kelly, like I got a sweet gift for you this year." And the whole family was like, "Okay." Like, "Okay, Chris." And Chris was like, he hands me this, and he got me he'd found like the Phantom of the Paradise like CD and DVD, and I like burst into tears because I hadn't even like thought about this movie in so long. Oh. And we were just thought, this is so crazy, and I couldn't believe it. She's like, "Yeah, I saw it at this thing, and like I just got it for you." And I was so moved by it because I hadn't thought about that memory, and I hadn't thought about like that weird time we'd shared. And then we watched it again, and we're like, this is still as cracked out.
It held up.
It had totally held up. And then that's when I started singing it at auditions and stuff. But there really isn't any character arc. Like even Swan doesn't go through any type of, like, everyone's just a one-dimensional archetype who has been put in this insane, even calling it the paradise is so wonderful. And just the way he talks is like the paradise, like this amazing rock hall, which I guess would be more of a New York thing anyways, right?
Yeah. New York was famous for places like the Tunnel and the Limelight and things that were just basically coke dens that had dancing in them, Studio 54 and everything else, where the glamorous, beautiful people would arrive and do things that would ruin them. Yeah. And it's weird. I mean, in LA, what would you have? Like the Whiskey or something would probably be the only kind of archetypal place. Yeah, you wouldn't have a live, like, concert hall venue that would pack. I mean, there's so many things to talk about, but even the costumes, they're so specific and real and tactile. Like, my favorite moment was when Beef thinks he's going to quit the show, and he comes downstairs in this like Santa costume. That's right. And it's you're like terry cloth. It's like a terry cloth like Santa jacket, like with the fur. And he's like, "No, I'm leaving." And oh man, and I love that Beef is never the same from any one scene to the next. Not only does he gets Queenie, he gets Butch, he gets weirdly. He has like a weird accent at one point. Yeah, it comes and goes, and I have a feeling that Garrett Graham, who's maybe got 20 minutes of screen time all in, including performance, I don't think he had a script. Like, he clearly knows what to do, but he's just making it up as he goes in a way that suits everything somehow, because the elasticity of the film's reality at that point is already so crazy that you could do anything and it would work. Mm-hmm. And so he does everything. Yeah. There's a moment in the film that I really love where he's trying to learn the music that Phoenix ends up singing later, and he's got the score in front of him, and he's listening, and he's like, trying to play along, and then he's like, this is written for a chick. And it made me so happy, because in the 70s, like, musicians wouldn't be able to read music. Whereas, like, if you put a new piece of music, a score, in front of maybe a frontman, I don't know, maybe I'm offending half of Toronto, but they wouldn't be able to read that thing. It was just so, he's just like, this is written for a chick. Like, I need to sing an octave high or whatever. Yeah. And, oh man. And then Swan's got those, like, two-piece suits. All the ascots. And then that freaky moment where, like, the devil tells him that he has to watch and listen his tape every night. So well done. Mm-hmm. Like, that's such a weird thing. It's a strange qualifier, right? It's a really weird thing. And you'd think he'd also be better at hiding it. Yeah. But, of course, it's only 90 minutes. You can't have you can't suddenly have a heist movie. You just find it and immediately destroy it. No. Yeah.
I think it has like maybe another reason why it wouldn't work on stage is the charm of it is that almost it feels like these are theater set pieces that are just being like thrown in, you know, there's such an arts and crafts thing to it. It's so weird. I just hope people want to watch this movie, or like, you know, it's a great alternative to doing drugs for sure.
Sure, you don't have to.
You don't have. I mean, I can't imagine.
Does them for you.
I can't imagine doing drugs and watching this movie. It would be too much.
It was a midnight movie for decades.
Oh.
I mean, I would be afraid to go see it with a crowd.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen it. No, wait, no. I must have. I think I saw it at the Blur once.
Well, this like Rocky Horror Picture Show has been the midnight movie for, you know, generations.
Released the following year, stole its thunder. And Fox clearly, I mean, distributed both movies and clearly got behind both of them.
Yeah.
But Rocky Horror, I think, is the sweeter, more inclusive musical. Phantom of the Paradise is weird and angry, and everybody dies and suffers and bleeds. And, I mean, I prefer it. I think it's a better construction because Rocky Horror never transcends its stage origins as a movie. And Shock Treatment tried to deal with that and didn't quite succeed either, but I love them. But I think Phantom is the one that just... I was going to say it knows what it's doing. I don't think it does. I think it's just discovering this incredible new ground as it's going. You know, he's writing it, and can I get away with this? And somehow, yes.
What did he do after this?
Carrie.
He did Carrie, right?
Yeah, of all things.
Which I think is funny because people are like, well, who made him? Like, Brian De Palma did Carrie. You know, like, they're like, oh, okay. So then I think... But that kind of... That movie went in a whole different direction with the... You know, and there's just not really much of a line you can draw besides the extreme...
Some Hitchcockian lifts and some high emotion points.
Yeah.
But there's no real... You look at the way John Carpenter's career evolved, another horror auteur, and you see a straight line. With De Palma, it's just like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this now. It's kind of what Soderbergh did.
Yeah.
And just, you know, way more aggressive direction, I guess, his cinema. And then he went back to the Fury. He's always been a blood and guts sort of filmmaker, and by which I mean both gore and also just wading into stuff.
Right.
And this is that, just in a completely different context and a milieu that he'd never visited since.
I mean, for me as a filmmaker, like, I would much rather do stuff that doesn't really resemble each other. Like, I watched this on Saturday, and I was like, oh, man, I want to make a Phantom of the Paradise. I want to make something that's just high, just high the entire time. Right. Something that's just so... His choices are so weird. They're so weird. They're so weird. Yeah, It's amazing how few people have seen this movie.
It's weird. I thought it had more of a cult following. I guess it did, and then it just went away for a while. Things ebb and flow, and the Shout Factory Blu-ray should have triggered a rediscovery, but I think people just keep it at arm's length still. It's like, that's the movie where the guy wears the motorcycle helmet face? What is that?
Yeah. If I ever meet Paul Williams, I'm going to bring it up. I wonder what he thinks about it. Yeah. I'd be like, just so you know... Little bit obsessed with Phantom of the Paradise, had an entire, like, not so traumatizing childhood because of this.
It's a formative experience. I can't conceive of seeing it that young.
Oh, so weird.
How much of it would you even understand? I mean,
we were just like...
Did you connect to one particular piece of it?
Well, I mean, at that point, I was 7 when I discovered that I wanted to be an actor. Like, I was gung-ho. Like, I've told this story a bunch, but I went to go see Hal Prince's revival of Showboat. Lynette McKee came out at the second act, sang the song Bill. I had a panic attack in the audience. Like, 7-year-olds don't have panic attacks. No. But I was shaking and, like, sweating, and my hair was sticking up on end, and I was watching this woman sing, and I was, like, I could hear her heartbeat, and I had this moment of, like, sheer inspiration, divine intervention, I don't know. Like, it was... totally weird, and my mom, was looking down at me like, "Are you all right?" And then this other girl came on, then the show continued. This girl comes on stage. She looks my age. She was like in the show, and I hated her. I was like, "You little shit!" I was just like, "I hate you! Like, why are you on stage?" And then I went home and like ran up to my room and like cried and cried and cried and cried. And my mom comes upstairs and she was like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "You'll never understand." Like, no, I just like wanted it so bad. And I'd never seen like a show or anything or play or whatever. I just saw it and boom, that was it. I just thought, for the rest of my life, every single thing I've ever done was geared towards performing. And, when I was 11, I like took myself downtown and get an agent, right? My mom was a single mom. She didn't have time for it. So she She's a wonderful stage mom in that she was very supportive. She was not a stage mom in that she knew anything about the industry or was going to help me. But, so yeah, I think when I watched Phantom of the Paradise, I was 11, and I loved the performance aspect of it. I mean, I loved Phoenix. I thought she was so cool to come out and, like, get everyone quiet. But I mean, we had also watched, like, so many weirder movies. When I first watched this, I didn't find it, you know, I understood it, and then I ended up having a couple of my friends watch it. I had a couple friends over, and we were watching it. The suicide bit in the tub, like, I always found suicide a very disturbing topic. Like, it was something that I couldn't think about. Like, it freaked me out too much. Mm-hmm. So, like, in the devil thing in the tub, I was like, didn't want to think about, like, that's what he was doing or whatever. But it also kind of blows by it pretty quick.
Yeah, and it's such a vain reason, too. Like, I'm going to get old, so I might as well kill myself and record this for posterity.
But that's all you need to know about that character. Yeah. And then when you find out that he has to watch himself be old for every day to bear witness or whatever, so freaky. There's one thing I don't understand, which is he gets Phoenix to sign a contract, but what is...
Yeah, we don't know exactly what she's being promised or why she survives at the end.
And then she's like, till death do us part. And then he's like, that's why we have to kill her. I felt like there was something to do with the reason he wants to kill her at the end was because she had signed some sort of contract. Also, it's like, you know, as a feminist and as someone who's always tracking female characters, it is kind of hilarious that she's like, they didn't, you know, she's like, I don't want to sleep with him in the beginning, right? And then she makes it, and then he's all like, great job. And then she's the one who's like, is that all you want? And then she goes and sleeps with him. And then you see her in the next scene, and she's like doing cocaine in the back of the car. I'm like, it's kind of awesome. That they just kind of make her a total sellout.
In the course of one day. If I've got the timeline right, that happens overnight.
Overnight, yeah. Like, literally. And he's in his room. He's not even like hitting on her that much. So she's like, you're a big success. You're going to be a star. And he's like, that's what I want for you. And she's like, that's what you only want? And then it cuts to them making out. And then it's just kind of like... I guess it's helpful for the Phantom's character to go through this. He
needs to be provoked.
Yeah. But it is pretty funny that she doesn't. You'd think now that she would have some sort of like you know, she'd be held back again. You know, she wouldn't want to do it.
Right. It would be a crisis point for her.
Crisis point, not at all.
Nope.
There's no crisis points for any of the characters.
It was 1973.
She's just like, well, I guess I get to sleep with
the next stage on the way to stardom.
Right, which is kind of amazing. She's just doing her thing.
And it's funny, that's a point where I guess everything in the movie sort of comes to a head narratively, but it also feels like the last bump.
Yeah.
They're just going to do one more and then be done, and then it all gets away from them, and creatively it just gets so completely out of hand.
The drugs.
It's just delirious explosion of everything.
So did Kate like it? Was she like...
I don't know yet. It's been 48 hours. She's still rocking back and forth in another room. I think she did. I know she enjoyed the experience, but she also hasn't articulated a feeling about it yet because it's so overwhelming.
Well, the best part is, like, I will play the Old Souls song or on the ukulele or whatever, and like, it's such an earworm. Like, those songs are so well written. Like, Paul Williams just knows how to write a good tune. Like, it's undeniable. And oh gosh, the music lasts. And then when you start to know the music, and when you watch the movie again, you notice how they are interwoven between, like, when Beef is kind of singing that song a little bit, and it's just so well done. Like, how they kind of, you see how the Phantom would be so upset about his music being mutilated like that, you know. So good. He's so dumb at the beginning. He's like, oh yeah, here's my entire score to that other guy. Oh man.
I assume everybody was just that naive in the early 70s. And I think that's why you couldn't make it now too. You couldn't remake this story.
No.
Not directly. You'd have to do it in period, and that would be pointless because you can never replicate it as well as they had captured it.
Yeah. Well, that's what we talk about with Sugar Daddy. It's like, how do you make a music movie? First of all, most music movies star men, like trying to make it 8 Mile, Purple Rain, like these. People have a lot of time for male characters who just are focused on their music, just focus on their art, like Inside Llewyn Davis, and they, we believe that this is the thing they want, and in the end, like we're rooting for them in that way, where we have a hard time letting female characters just want to focus on something, be it sports, be it art, whatever, because we have this expectation that they want to find a man, and that's like their character arc, which we are obviously fighting against with this film. So but how do you make a music movie where right now in this day and age you can make so much music just in your own apartment?
Sure, yeah.
So we kind of play with this idea of like authenticity, and like, you know, there's this great Bjork article in Pitchfork where she talks about how like she's made all this music and produced her own music and all this stuff, and yet she'll have one producer work on like a part of one track, and people are interviewing him and saying like, what was it like producing Bjork's track? And she's like, I have to take photos of myself in the studio to prove that I've produced like every aspect of this. Or you have musicians like Grimes who produces every like sound on her track, and she doesn't want anyone to produce her sounds because we have such a hard time believing in the female auteur. So with this movie, you know, we're trying really hard to think of ways to cinematically show a character writing music in it, like being in that creative space, playing multiple different instruments. I just bought a pedal steel because in the show she plays a pedal steel because I'm an insane person and I thought it was smart to write a movie where a character plays a pedal steel, which turns out is the hardest instrument to learn.
I believe it's quite complicated. Yeah.
Yeah. This guitarist, this very well-known Canadian electric guitarist, was like, if I practiced he's like, I'm a professional guitar player, and if I practice every day on the pedal steel for a whole year, I might be able to play live. I'm like, okay, cool. So, all right, I've got 6 months. So it's definitely the art of showing music being made and the construction of music is something I've always been drawn to, and of course this movie is a hilarious example of that, which is why anytime I drop it in a meeting, I'm like, you know, like it's like definitely modern, but it has that kind of like pulsating intensity of Phantom of the Paradise, and people are like, did you just say Phantom of the Paradise?
It's good, you're finding your tribe.
Yes, I know. And then my people are like, what are you talking about? I'm like, it's this movie. It's like Phantom of the Opera, but nothing like Phantom of the Opera. Because Phantom of the Opera is also like a dirty word in the musical theater community.
Well, I was about to say, you've mentioned a lot of composers, and Weber
is not on there.
Needn't come up, and no. I'm not surprised. Frankly, I've always been. My thing is, I've always been more of an Ashman-Menken lover, and of course, they only did a handful of scores before Ashman died.
Yeah.
And,
well, I like Angelo Weber when he was working with Tim Rice, which was in the 70s when they did Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah, so that sort of complexity. And,
well, also they were like these young, you know, down and out 70s, you know, dudes living in London, just like trying to make, like they had that kind of, and then he got really, really famous and I think got lazy.
You can say it.
And wrote, you know, kind of musicals that were, like, listen, I grew up, I know all the words to all of Angela Weber's musicals. I know that, like, Cats, really, like, okay, but, yeah, like, I love Jesus Christ Superstar. I was going to say that it's another, I could talk about Jewidson's Jesus Christ Superstar for hours as well, because another incredibly, like, you know, it has that same type of feel as Phantom of Paradise, where you're almost like seeing the seams, like you're seeing the actors put this on, like you're watching them. You can see the construction of it, or you can deconstruct it because you're seeing them bring it to you. Yeah,
I mean that was the opening sequence is them showing up in the bus. Well, Kara G actually did the Jesus Christ Superstar episode.
No way.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. Oh my gosh, I have to come and listen to that. I can't. I did not know she loved Jesus Christ Superstar.
It's a good episode.
It's a good episode. No, that movie is so good. I watch it I'm not a religious person, but it always plays over Easter. Mm-hmm. It's always on, so I'm always like, I like flip through the channels. I'm like, okay, where's Jesus Christ Superstar? And they're so sweaty and 70s and like sinewy and like dancers in the 70s, similar to this movie. Yeah. They're just like a different type of body, you know. Like they're just
Godspell too. It's an example of that when you see the film version.
Oh gosh, you're just like, oh, did you eat any? Oh, just the drugs. Got it.
Yeah. What's for dinner?
Drugs for dinner. Oh yeah, God, so good. Poor
people.
You know, we've talked about so many musicals. I love it.
Yeah, this is great. Well, I will wrap the podcast with the same question we always end on, which is, and you've kind of already answered it, what, if anything, have you absorbed, borrowed, stolen, has made it of the Phantom of the Paradise into your own creative DNA?
Such a good question. As a performer, I try and seek out, and maybe this, you know, the Neddeaus was something that we were able to do this in, is like, I do like when the camera's like super close and you're just like, you're living your inner life and you could think something and the camera's gonna pick it up. But I love like showing like my freak flag, you know, like being like all like Freddie Mercury styles, like you know. And when I watch the Phantom of the Paradise, as I kind of said earlier, there's such an inhibition in this, like, I'm willing to just be sweaty, ugly, like absolutely crazy, wacky, weird. And if you have, I'd like to make a movie or even perform in a movie where I have that kind of wild inhibition physically, where you can just be a freak, and the camera, and it's almost like anti-cinema. It's not, you're not contained in a frame. You are like, you waiting for the DP to pick you up if they have to, and if that means that it's a giant wide, then fine, you know. Like, you see that in movies and the way people move, and in Harold and Maude, and in a lot of, you know, in Jesus Christ Superstar, it's like these full bodies on stage. And I think as a female, like, the expectations of to look to your body to be a silhouette and for you to stand a certain way, I would love nothing more than to make a movie and be in a movie and create opportunities for other actors to kind of like really express in that full-bodied 70s way. Yeah,
so, it really isn't happening anymore, is it? I mean, even in stuff like La La Land, which uses the austere kind of imagery, full shots, people performing, you don't have a sense of physicality, you have a sense of choreography.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's, I mean, you know, it's a big thing is that, like, as a film actor sometimes, like, you don't even need to know, like, it's like on stage, it's like this thing called stage presence, like physical stage presence. You walk on stage, you have to know where to put your hands and to how to walk and how that character does all that stuff. In film, all that is necessary if you're interested in doing it, but with lenses getting more and more precise and the lens getting closer and closer and closer and people working towards ultra realism, which I think is great a lot of times, I do miss a lot of that, like, you know, Taxi Driver-esque kind of like watching a character walk across the street and seeing how being able to tell what music the character listens to by their body. And I don't know if it's a combination of just like the history of styles or the type of lenses people want to use now or whatever. I don't know. It's very rare do you ask the DP when you're on set. Like, you're like, all right, what's the frame? And they're like, it's really close. And you're like, okay, so I cannot move. And like, the reason I became a performer is because if I could perform by myself for nobody, I'd still be doing it. Like, I just love the physical act of storytelling, and that involves your whole body. And for women especially, like, they're always telling you to tone it down. And that's, if I could take one thing from Phantom of the Paradise, it's that I wish that we didn't have to tone it down. And maybe there isn't an appetite for it. I don't know. Like, you know, La La Land. But would you say that there's a part in La La Land where people are, like, you know, unhinged? No.
No, I mean, I think about the sequence, the sort of dressing to go out for the party sequence with four women in,
that's true. It's a weird
full view of each other, kind of moving back and forth through the rooms. That's as close as it gets.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's kind of a weird, besides the fact that they're both musicals, that there's not really much to compare, but... Yeah.
But it's just the modern standard now. It's become by virtue of being the thing that happened.
Yeah.
Most recently, animated films mostly. You know, like something like Moana, which is a proper Broadway musical.
Yeah.
In a way that maybe even Frozen wasn't. Mm-hmm. But that brings back that huge sense of, you know, of inviting the audience into this gargantuan story and running around inside crowds. And now you do it digitally. You don't do it with people anymore.
Yeah, like the when you watch... So we'll keep going, but like the set, when you watch those 70s movies and you're like, those crowd scenes, I think, wow, this looks actually, like, I don't know how this looks dangerous.
Yeah. There's like, we were doing Clute a year and a bit ago with Nadia Let's Pick Clute, and I watched the extras, the special features on the DVD, and there's a little thing about a scene shot at a club, and it's chaos. I don't think they were playing music. That's the only difference. Yeah. The people are miming.
Yeah.
But there are 300 people and somebody has to get yanked off a chair and it's all just happening, and there's probably a PA on either side. Yeah. But that's it. There's just nothing.
Well, I think also that I think it has, I'm not a director and I'm not like a camera person. I'm the person who writes films, acts in them, and produces them. But I'm sure that there's something to be said for like lighting and cameras and filters and like how you can't, like, now with movement, it's so specific, and it has to be placed, and you have to set up how the lighting's hitting you to fill the camera lens for these fancy lenses. Mm-hmm. But back in the day, when you just like flood light onto a bunch of people, and you just have like taxi cabs going by and all that, and then also, you know, you watch someone like Jenna Rollins in A Woman Under the Influence, which Ingrid Veninger did a great episode for. All of her shots are from the knees up, and she is using her whole body in a way I've never seen before. And that, like, I watched that movie once the first time, and I watched it a second time right away, twice, and I bawled my eyes out because I was like, who's this? What? Like, this performance is insane. And so, yeah, I don't know what and maybe like in Sugar Daddy, there's obviously performance scenes, and you know, the director and I, Wendy Morgan, talk about that, is like, how does Darren, the character, like physically own the stage, because we can get away with a little bit of that as opposed to it being like right on my... You missed that. That noise was me making a close-up shot here. So yeah, that's what I would take away of that. And then also, as a writer, Phantom of the Paradise will constantly be this litmus test for like, how confident in your choices are you? Would you like to make this a split screen? Why not? Would you like to do this? I don't know. Like, yeah, it's also so colorful. So colorful.
Yeah. So if you can, I'm just thinking, can you use Phantom as a should I do this? It's like, that's already been done in the most insane way possible.
Yeah, I don't know if I would ever do something. I think the point of Phantom is to make the wackiest expression of your freakness, and it can't be an iteration of someone else's wacky expression of their freakness. But I definitely have a couple ideas that are wacky expressions of my freakness, where I could go, you know, like, should this drop into surrealism? Sure. Should this turn into the musical number? Why not? Like, I want a film one day to feel like arts and crafts for me, and it to be like this splattering, like as if I'd gotten high and I was expressing it in this totally theatrical way. And then also, like, then that, you know, that would tip the scale, and I would want to do something really like subtle and under, like, subtextual, and there's no subtext to this.
No, it's all text. And the text is don't do drugs.
It's all text, and it's all archetypes. There are no character arcs, just chaos.
It's kind of what makes it perfect.
Exactly. It's a perfect film.
My thanks to Kelly McCormack, who you can and will enjoy as Zeph on Killjoys, Fridays at 8 p.m. on Sci-Fi in the US and Space in Canada, and in the Neddeaus of Duquesne Island, available right now on CBC Digital. And keep an eye out for Barn Wedding and Play the Film. They're bound to turn up somewhere. You can find Kelly on Twitter at Kel McCormack, all one word, Kel McCormack, and you can find Phantom of the Paradise in a suitably vivid Blu-ray edition from Shout Factory. It's also on DVD from 20th Century Home Fox and available on iTunes and Google Play, but really, the Shout Blu-ray, that's the way you want to go. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. If you want to leave a review on iTunes, that would be very kind of you, or just rate us with the little stars. And just remember, never sign a contract before running it past a lawyer and a priest first. Thanks for listening.